But to make it practical in Nigeria's case, we need to have training programs for our police. So in most cases of maybe gender or sexual abuse in Nigeria, if a married couple, or maybe a married woman or a married man goes to police to report and say that he has been abused by his wife or has been abused by her husband, they will tell you to go and deal it at home, go and take care of it at home as a family matter. So in that case, clearly, police are not being trained on what the law says. So that's training programs. You need to have shelters for people who are going in between these things. So for example, let's say, you have a lot of child marriage in Nigeria's north, and you have a lot of female genital mutilation in Nigeria's south, and southeast. Let's say, okay, you have people who are victims of these things. There has to be a sort of halfway house that takes care of these people's needs and make sure that their basic needs like shelter, food, clothing, education, healthcare are met while they can be reintegrated back into society. All of this requires money. It requires money. It requires spending, public spending. And because our policymakers and our bureaucrats are more interested in just signing documents, we will never get to that point. So clearly, that's an issue on its own. Then you mentioned what again? Please remind me. Hello, Leon. Okay, I'll just go on. So yeah, it's all three of them. It's all three of them. It's an issue of implementation. It's an issue of lack of political will. But more than all of this, it's an issue of Nigerian policymakers preferring to allow the status quo to stay in place. And for me, another testament to that is how grossly underfunded the Ministry of Human Affairs is. It's grossly underfunded. It's almost as if it's almost it is collective crew that's running there, really. So yeah.
That's serious. So that means our problem is threefold when it comes to that. While we're stalling is because there's legislative delay, there is implementation gap, and you've also mentioned that there is enforcement weakness. So, but in that case, Oyindamola, if you're on the call, please let me know so that I can direct some question to you, because you're part of the people that worked on this policy, and your expert opinion too will be needed. My next question is, what are the core problem we are actually trying to solve? What is the core problem you are trying to solve with the document that you created, with the research that you did? Is it inequality of law? Is it inequality of access? Or is it the inequality of the enforcement? Or is it all three again? So that we know what we are dealing with. Chike, you can go ahead. I think Oyindamola is not with us.
Yeah. Thank you. So as it is right now, okay, so let me just take this on the side. So it's supposed to be an announcement, it's a big announcement, but then I cannot say it here. So one of the things that we're trying to do at TableFix right now is to help at least propose solutions, so helping Nigeria close policy gaps on a national scale. And that involves us going over all the SDGs one by one and seeing how we can show the gap between what the goal is and what the country is, and how we can close that gap. So when we were preparing this brief for SDG 5, at the core of our practice or our telos, at the core of our goal or end goal, is that we want to show that, first of all, that the excuses that the government typically gives, or that the excuses the excuses that are mainstream are what they are, excuses, and they don't really hold water. Like, for example, lack of political will. Probably it's not political will, because in the past 20 years, we've had, or past 30 years, we've had about 3 major gender reform bills go through. It's not necessarily political will. It's more of like incentives and then following through that end. So our goal was to assess the problem and then provide recommendations for how we think Nigeria as a nation can close the gender gap. That's at the core of our research, and to further test our conditions. In our brief, we examined several African countries. We examined Rwanda, we examined South Africa. Part of why the brief is not out yet is because we're adding Namibia to that list, so that's in the works. So let me just say that here. So I also examined Namibia and other countries who have seemed to be gender progressive over the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah, so we're trying to see what African peers are doing and compare. What can Nigeria learn from this? For example, Namibia for the past 3 years has been eighth position out of 106 countries in the Global Gender Gap Index. They've been eighth for 3 years now. While Nigeria has been 124th, 125th, 126th. Like, we're way down on the list. So at some point, Rwanda was sixth, because Rwanda at that point had around over 50% of their local assembly was women. So obviously they got something right. So what can Nigeria learn from these countries, and how can we get better? So these were the things we had in mind.
Okay, thank you very much for that. But another question that comes to my mind as you're talking about that is, which assumptions do policymakers most often make that collapse under real political pressure? So when they're trying to make these policies, they just make an assumption. With your experience as a public policy researcher and expert, as it were, what have you seen, or what kind of assumptions do you think policymakers make whenever they are trying to make about these kind of things?
Okay, thank you, dear. Yeah, so I would call it an assumption. I would call it more of like a dependency in that sense. So policymakers know that Nigerians have a collective short-term memory. They know. I feel that they are acutely aware of this. I feel they are really, because they are aware that if they simply pass an act, get it signed into law by the presidency, and do all of that, that Nigerians would temper down on the issue and not ask as many questions as they should. So they really rely on that on most issues that are very critical. One of the few cases that Nigerians did the opposite was regarding the Electoral Act amendments of just a few weeks ago, where there was uproar or protests. This was a central issue that Nigerians were aware about, so they couldn't just get away with it. But trust me, there are so many, and this is not a broad political position, so I can't go into all of that. But there are so many other policies that Nigerians just overlook that are really sketchy, that normally we should actually ask more questions and inquire and say, why is this way? How will this come about? This is not funded. Another one that I was researching, I think about a month ago, was regarding cancer care in Nigeria. That's another debate that I'm not here for, but let me put that on one side. Basically, what I'm saying is that they are so sure that if they just for the camera sign an act or do something public people can see, people will let off. But then that's what I'll call it dependency. But if I'm to say an assumption, I would say they are not, like, they assume Nigerians are still in the 1990s. I know I'm saying that. Yeah, I know I'm saying that because typically they assume that currently that Nigerians are still in that space of, women have these roles, men have these roles, men should lead society, men should be left in the kitchen. I mean, just a few years ago, our president made a public statement that his wife is for the kitchen and for the other room. So it's on global television. And they still have that mindset that Nigerians as a whole think in that line. And that's because they are not watching the data. If they are, they know that Nigerian women account for around almost 70% of small scale businesses. And those small scale businesses account for, at least in volume, not in amount, those small businesses account for around 65% of our national GDP. So they really are not aware of the data. Like, they're not watching these things. They're not aware that it's a new generation. Nigerians are now mostly young. Nigerian population is around over 60% youth at this point. So you can't expect that entire mass to hold those same assumptions that were maybe given in the 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, it's a new age, it's a new day. Nigerian population is young. And when policymakers are not aware of that, they think they can just get away with anything in that sense. So I think that's how I'll answer that. I'm not sure that's a clear answer, but that's what I think.
All right, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so in order to answer that question, what assumptions do policymakers think about when they make policies? One of the greatest assumptions that policymakers think when they make policies is that they believe that once the policy is signed, then there is a behavioral change with the people, and that is very, very bad. Because in Nigeria, our institutions work on incentive. Everybody wants an incentive. The policemen want an incentive to do their jobs. The teachers in the school want an incentive to do their job. The lecturers in the university want their incentive to do their job. So policymakers often assume that once a law is passed or once the law is picked up from research, they believe that that law is about to become a behavioral change pattern for so many people. And apart from gender, we can look into so many laws that we passed in Lagos State. For example, if we look at the law of environmental sanitation that says that people have to clean up their market, especially the one for the market women and market men, which says that they have to clean up the market by 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. before they open. But many people don't do this because they don't see sanitation as a very, very big deal. And when you bring it down to gender, there are institutions that actually, we have some institutions that is actually supposed to take care of the work of gender. For example, in Lagos, we have the CSEA. But most times, when you take cases gender issues, domestic violence, when you take them to the police station, the police stations are always wanting an incentive. If I want to arrest my daughter, I have to take about 100,000 naira to the police for them to even follow me to come and arrest the person. So when policies are not
I think we are losing Oyindamola. Oyindamola is in transit and trying to join.
made with the intention of the state, then there's no how this policy you can do research on what kind of policy would you take.
All right, thank you very much, Oyindamola. I think we've gotten a bunch of what you're trying to say there, which makes a lot of sense. If you're just joining us or you went on here when we started, this is the February Liberty briefings from Face of Liberty International, and the topic that we're dealing with today is when law exists but justice doesn't. Why gender reform stall in Nigeria? All right, so in that case, we've seen so far that according to the research done by the Simple Fix Nigeria, Nigeria has a lot of problems, even though we are good in some aspects as well. There's legislative delay, there's implementation gap, and there's enforcement weakness when it comes to the SDG 5 of the SDG goals. And the truth of the matter is there's inequality of the law, inequality of access, and at the same time, inequality of enforcement. And the assumption that our policymakers tends to make when they're trying to listen, or as it were, when they're trying to prepare the policy itself, is relying on old data, not listening to the set of people that the policy is meant for, and thinking this is what it's supposed to be. And this has caused a lot of problems. But I just want to chip in, Donald. Do you think this is primarily a capacity problem or an incentive problem?
Just to be clear, capacity in what sense?
So they don't know what they do. The people that get into the position of power does not even understand what the seat is all about in the first place. Maybe someone just get to understand that, oh, my father is a friend to one powerful person, and that was how I get into the space of politics and get into government and sort of things like that. Do you think it's a capacity problem or incentive problem?
So I think it's both. I think it's both. It's a capacity problem in the sense that, okay, let me do a bit of geeking out now. So in Nigerian context, we know our House of Rep, we know our Senate, but one thing we don't see them as policymakers. We call them lawmakers, call them policymakers, but we don't view them as such. We view our policymakers like politicians. And because of that view of our policymakers, that determines how we elect them. So when we're electing someone, we don't choose someone based on how credible he is, his credentials, what he has studied, what he knows, his experience in the public space or the private sector. We don't look at all this stuff. We vote people based on who is popular, basically. So currently in Nigeria, the idea of public policy is a novel idea. It's so novel. In fact, I just finished my master's program in policy. When I tell people that I have a master's in policy, they tell me, what's that? They don't really know what it means. And if you say the same thing, perhaps in Europe or in the Americas, their brains are all lit up like a Christmas tree because they are aware about policy, what it implies, and its implications. So generally, now this is not to insult any particular statesman or policymaker, but as a whole, we have incompetent policymakers because they don't have the experience for it, they don't have the skill for it, and their ears are not typically on the ground to know, okay, what's currently involved in the world, what's working right now in the world. So, for example, how most of them do not know what is gender responsive budgeting. It's a very simple idea. So I know for most people who read documents, before they read documents, if they're Nigerians, they probably have never heard that term before in their lives.
Yeah.
They probably heard it before. Yeah. But it's a very simple idea. It's simply just saying how every naira or every dollar you spend affects the male and female gender. That's all. Very simple. So that's the level of capacity. A level of incentives. Now, this is more advanced, not advanced, it's more like a secondary cause. So because our policy is so politics driven, it's so politics driven. If there's no incentive to do the right thing or to innovate our policy, try it works better, or to, for example, close gender gaps using policy, it's not there, it will never happen. It will just never happen. So one of our recommendations in our research and our brief is what we call a no data, no budget rule. So typically what happens in Nigeria every year is that each ministry, each MDA brings out their budget for the next year and submit it to the presidency. They do all the review, do the costing, allocate the money. What we're saying here is that if each MDA or ministry cannot by themselves show us, okay, how exactly, and this how exactly now is in terms of numbers like maybe school entry rates, maternal mortality mortality rates, gender pay gap. There are lots of them really, but then show us exactly the numbers. How this money you're going to spend, whether it's the Ministry of Works, I don't care. Whether it's the Ministry of Power, I really don't care. How this money I'm going to spend is going to affect the male and female gender, at least on a basic level, because it's still new to Nigeria, so let me not be too demanding. Let's say, okay, just when I went general. But then in more advanced countries, you see gender budgeting on the level of age groups. You see, for people who are senior citizens, people who are working class, people who are youth, children, they show how the money they're going to spend affects all these groups. So generally, one of the things that I think will really help our policymakers and Nigerian MDAs to think more in gender light is if you say no data, no budget. So you don't get your money until you're able to show us this. In that case, there is now the incentive, like you mentioned now. There's now an incentive to do the right thing. So that's why I said for me, it's more of a two-way problem. It's it's capacitative, but there's also the part of it, there being an incentive for it to work out.
But if I lean in on you a bit with what you just answered, it's more like 80-20. 80% capacity, 20% incentive.
I'll go with 70-30.
Striker.
Just to be controversial.
70 what?
I'll go with 70-30 just to be controversial.
Okay, let's stay in the middle, 75-25.
No, 60-40.
All right. So that being said, we've discussed about the clarity and the diagnosis. Most times people spend a lot of time on diagnosis, and we've actually spent some time on diagnosing the problem of Nigeria. But now let's talk about the incentives and the federalism of Nigeria. Let's examine the structure. We all know that Nigeria, as some other countries in Africa, operate under federalism and legal pluralism. And because of that, there are some things that needs to be in check. My question to you or to Oyinda Amola is, to what extent does federal structure protect diversity? To what extent do you think the federal structure protect diversity with the study that you've done? Chike, are you still with me?
Yeah, Windows troubles, but I'm back now.
Okay, great. So I was asking, to what extent does federal structure protect diversity? We know we run at the federalism in a federal state in Nigeria. So to what extent does this federal structure protect diversity? We all know that all these things are recorded in our laws and all, but are we really protected? And to what extent does it shield inequality? This is our federal structure that we carry in our head so much.
Okay, this is a very dicey one, but let me just go into it. Yeah, so if I'm hello?
Right, I was saying, would you like me to answer?
I think I want to jump on it.
Yeah, go on, I can hear you. Go on.
Yes. Okay, so federalism and how it has been able to save up gender, or should I say how it has been able to protect diversity in Nigeria. So if we look at our 1999 constitution, which has been reformed over and over again, there have been so many provisions and acts to guide gender or to guide diversity generally. For example, now myself and Chike worked on a bill that had to do with the Minority Act. That in that Minority Act, we wanted to bring people together to make sure that people from different places in Nigeria are being understood the same way as the big ethnic groups. Now, if we look at the way federalism has been able to solve the issues of protect gender in Nigeria, it has been able to give us the same laws all over the system. Now, we have the Child Act of 2003. We have the Violence Act, the Violence Against Persons Act that was also done, I think, in 2012 or 2013. That was where the Lagos State DSDA was able to come out from, was able to come out from. Now, federalism has been able to work in that aspect in the sense of diversity. So now we have the same laws that govern all the old 36 states when it comes to gender. Now, the problem is that states are not being institutionalized. States are not being domesticated. They are not working on these laws as what the federal government has made. So if you have a state like Lagos State government that is still trying to curb up its violence against persons under the DSDA, and you have a state like Zamfara where there's still the same constitution, but Zamfara state is not really doing anything about it, mainly because of its cultural regions or its religion. So I hope we can understand that the federal government have been able to do well by creating diversity when it comes to gender policy, when it comes to bringing up policy for the old 36 states. But now the problem now comes to state domestication. So thank you.
That's a deep one. So the federal system already put this thing in place, but domestication is the problem. Chike, let me come to you. When states delay domestication of national reforms, is that democratic autonomy or institutional avoidance?
Leon wants to put me on the spot. Okay. Well, to be honest, so, oh my God. Anyway, so let me just do this. So I would say it's democratic autonomy, but then also one of the consequences of true democratic autonomy is institutional avoidance. Let me try and explain. Yes, it's a consequence of it. Let me try and explain. I'll use a very simple African proverb that we know. Too many cooks spoil the soup. Very simple.
Especially if you're cooking jollof rice.
Jollof rice, oh, very important. When it's time, it oh yeah, too many cooks spoil the soup. So while I agree that democratic autonomy is very important, it's very important actually, it's non-negotiable. Also, we have to keep in mind that for a democracy to work properly, there has to be some general agreements. There has to be. This thing you're mentioning now also leads into the conflict between the Sharia law system and our federal law system, and how there's a mix and parallel between both of them. And in certain states in Nigeria, the Sharia law is more dominant. And I'm not a legal expert. I don't claim to be one. But then anyone who clearly reads the text, who reads the edict of Sharia law, and then reads those of our constitution, so that in several instances there is a conflict. You can't have both. You really can't have both. So it will either be a case of maybe if some states want to go in, and this question you asked has thrown me off tangents, but it's very important that I say this. So personally, I think democratic autonomy is very important. But in this context now, because of how different the cultures and the demands of the Sharia system and some of Islamized Nigeria is, I think Nigeria will do better in some areas to be more confederate than federate. What that will mean will be that, so in certain regards, do entirely maybe this state or this region, if this is what you choose to believe, you can choose to do that. But if you want to be part of our federation fully, and not just a confederate part of us, you have to go by our laws. Because there's no debate around it. If you look at the Constitution of Nigeria, if you look at Sharia's edicts, there are direct conflicts. You can't resolve it. And for years, we've been saying, just overlook it. But it's not helping us. I mean, it took 22 years for Zamfara to domesticate the Child Rights Act. 22 years, bro. That's a full adult, man. 22 years. Like, that long. And
if it were to be female, it would have been giving birth somewhere.
Exactly. Like, and that's because the Child Rights Act simply says that, this is in one of the clauses, that a child cannot get married, and marriage is only possible for people who are over 18.
Yeah.
Very simple. And that line alone cost 22 years. In that period, people have died, people have given birth to. I'm like, that's a long period of time. In my opinion, that's just not working. So if in this instance, if you say, okay, this is where we want to go, it's fine. It can be a confederate part of our country. It can be confederate. So that changes the rules around you. You can just do that. But if you want to be part of our country, call allocation, do all these things, the way other states are doing it, you have to comply with the federal laws, at least on the federal level. If what you say is that on a state level, you choose to differently interpret federal laws, I understand. But then if your state laws are directly against federal laws, it's a problem. It's a problem. This is my view. I'm just being very honest, but this is my view on it.
Okay.
All right, so, I would like to counter what you had just said. Although I believe that democratic autonomy is what makes a state or different states in Nigeria move forward. But when it comes to the issue of reenacting federal policies or federal laws in states, it has to do with institutional avoidance. We have so many institutions in a particular state that causes so many clashes with the government ideas. For example, when you have a state where there's a cultural institution, there's a religious institution, there's a social institution, there are so many institutions. It causes a whole lot of problems. And that's why I say institutional avoidance. Because the governor doesn't want to, the governor of a particular state doesn't want to step on the feet of any of these institutions. If I am a Muslim, I would not want to step on the feet of a Christian when it comes to Quran. If I am a Christian governor, I would not want to step on the feet of the Muslim clerics in my state. So institutional avoidance is part of the reasons why federal laws are not being enacted in the state. If we say we should look at it. For example, now, the Child Rights Act that Chike just mentioned, which says that a child should not get married more than 18 years of age. Now, let's look at the case that happened in Nasarawa about 2 years ago, where the Minister of Women Affairs came outside and was like, they wanted to give some children into marriage in Nasarawa State, some orphans into marriage in Nasarawa State. Those girls are barely 17 years old. And the minister came out and said, no, this cannot happen under her watch. And then we saw the way so many institutions, especially the Islamic institutions, came up to stand against the minister. So sometimes when the federal government wants to be enacted in so many states, the institutions come up and they fight. And if we cannot solve institutional problems, then there's nothing we can do about gender reform or any kind of federal laws in any state. Thank you.
I think what you just opened is what they call the Pandora box. And if we should dip our hands into it today, it will be very, very crazy. Because I think it's Chike, I think for the sense of people that are listening, I think we need to work on a day that we are going to dissect what the Nigerian law and the Sharia law, the contradiction between. I think it's one of the projects that you at Simple Fix Nigeria should do. I put that to you. I know you're
ambitious.
I know you are new in the space. You're just launching, but there's a lot of work for you to do, and we welcome you to this space because not just Nigeria, the whole of Africa have a lot of problems, and I'm happy that we have people from across Africa joining in today. I'm seeing someone from Botswana on the call, and I saw someone before. I think she left from one East African country. But let me ask you this right now. For every reform produced in any country, there is always a winner and there's always a set of losers. When it comes to political cost of gender reform, who bears the cost when this fails? Don't stay too long on it. 1-2 minutes. Who bears the cost?
Okay, so put some.
The first
Hello,
can you hear me?
Go ahead.
So I said when it comes to the cost of gender reform, the both parties bear the cost. The politicians, they bear the cost politically, because I don't think there is any politician that would stand up in any state to enact a law that doesn't favor that state. They will lose their mandate in that state. If Tinubu should stand up today and say, okay, he wants to make sure that the Child Rights Act and the Violence Against Persons Act are being enforced in the northern states of Nigeria, he's going to lose his bid as the presidency. In fact, if we want him to lose his bid as the presidency, that's actually what we need him to do. We need him to make sure that he reenact those laws and make them compulsory, because he's going to cost a whole lot of war and then he's going to lose the mandate. And then when it comes to the social aspect, women bear the social cost for gender reform, because when a law like violence against persons is passed, which includes domestic violence, harmful traditional practices which have to do with female genital mutilation, traditional attendance, and laws that protect the women. When these laws are not being enacted, it's at cost of their life. For example, a woman who has been battered by her husband continuously, and they keep going to the police station, and the police tells them that, oh, it's a family affair, they should go and talk with their family, they'll be fine. That woman's life is in jeopardy. So there are two people that bear the cost. The politicians bear the cost by losing their mandate on the people, and then the women bear the cost by almost losing their life or even being in danger or in harm.
So if I get you correctly, you're saying the politicians lose only if they try to enact the law. Is that what you're saying, Indamola?
Yes.
But on the other way around, the people suffers whether they enact it or not. So, in essence, let me put it back to you. Who really loses?
Well, the people lose more. If the gender reform is not reformed properly, there's institutional gap or institutional lack of enforcement. Women, especially, bear the cost of gender reform.
Wow, that's serious. And I think this is something we need to talk more often, and not just talk about it. Make people who can act on it. And Simple Fix Nigeria, thank you for giving us this opportunity to actually see the issue behind this, because everybody's just sharing SDG. How is the SDG go affecting us? And I like where we're coming out from this. Now we've talked about the incentive and the federalism. If you're just joining us, this is the February edition of the Liberty Briefings from Face of Liberty International. And the topic that we are dealing with today is a topic that really, really resonates. When law exists, but justice doesn't. Why gender reform stalls in Nigeria? Though we're talking about Nigeria today, but something is very, very clear. The same problem we're having in Nigeria is the same problem a lot of us are having all across Africa and even across the world. Because like one of my mentors would say, politicians, policymakers are the same everywhere. I don't know if that is correct, but that is the same that is common around where I stay. But now, Chike, at the beginning, you talk about budget. You created a budget, and let me read the line that you mentioned. You said the seriousness of the law or a policy is shown when the government allocates money to it. That was exactly the exact word you used. So,
yeah,
my question leads now to money. Yeah. Can we call reform successful if it is not backed by enforcement, architecture, and funding? Is it that all the policy has to go through funding?
So, money is very important. For anyone who is a student of political science, they'll tell you that politics tells you how. So policy. So let me try to explain this. Policy tries to explain how best to use resources. Why politics shows you in a brutal fashion where money goes to who, where which money goes to who. Whether it's smart.
You have to say that again. I didn't quite get that.
So policy is trying to, or rather, good policy is trying to maximize the use of resources.
Mm-hmm.
Why politics? Politics determines who gets what, how, and when. So politics necessarily, on a very core level, is not interested in policy. It's not. Politics is just saying who gets what, how, and when gets it. So why this is important is because no matter the policy you have, no matter how good it is, how evidence-based it is, data, research, I'm a big research guy. I like research, I like data, I like numbers. That's who I am. But no matter the work you do, if the political incentive is not there to influence the resources to go to those good causes that you have in mind, nothing will ever work. So in this sense, yes, money is very important. Yeah. And then how I'll say it is that when money finally gets to a project, that is when you know that, okay, something's about to happen. although in that context, there's also a part of embezzlement, and let's not go there. But my point is that when you find money being allocated, so for let me use an example. For example, in Nigeria, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, there was HIV/AIDS. At that point in time, there was little hope for humanity. It was no cure, no drugs to stifle it, and all of that. And then the Federal Ministry of Health created what they called NACA, that's National Agency for AIDS Control. Yeah, NACA. By creating NACA, they basically made that an agency that the government must, by definition, fund every year or find money for every year. And if NACA doesn't get money, the House of Rep, the Senate has to answer. So by just making that agency alone, it made Nigerians Ministry of Health start looking for foreign donation, bill amendment, and several other things started happening. But if Nigeria was to tackle AIDS without NACA, I can bet you that it would be like this gender issue. I can bet you my life savings. Because as long as money is not demanded to be there, nothing is going to happen, Leon. That's the honest truth. As long as money is not flowing there, or money is not being demanded every single year, no one is accountable. No one is asking how much entered, how much got out, what was done with the money. As long as that does not exist, nothing is going to happen. Nothing at all. It's why also one of our recommendations in our brief is to create. Let me not go into it now. That'll take too much time. But yeah, it's also one of our recommendations to have that amount of accountability on MDAs, agencies, and government also. But yeah, that's how I answer that.
Okay. Oida, if you're still with us, let me come to you for this next question. And please, let's cut it short. We only have about 25 minutes more for this discussion. We should be out of here by 4 p.m. West African time. My next question to you, Oida, is when gender-responsive budget is weak, what signal does that send about political priority?
I'm not sure she can hear us.
Oida, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, do you hear my question? Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, please repeat your question.
Okay, so when gender-responsive budgeting is weak, what signal does that send about political priorities?
Well, first of all, let me say there is an adage I grew up learning, and which has been very, very visible to me when I started learning about public policy. Nigeria doesn't have a budget problem, but a management problem, because there is no ministry or there is no department in Nigeria that will tell you that they don't get money to work. But the problem is, how do they use that money to work? How do they manage that money?
Are you still with us?
Last time.
Oh. Your network is really fluctuating, Oyindamola. If you can hear us. Chike, I'm going to.
And I am just telling it. I am not taking what happens in so many Nigerian governments. Hello?
Go ahead now. We can hear you now.
Me?
Go ahead.
Oh, so I'm saying that we don't have a budget problem in Nigeria. We have a management problem.
So there is money.
Yes, there is
it's
money.
The management that is the problem. And that's why I think that's why Chike was mentioning embezzlement and he just caught it before.
Yes. So how is this money being used? We have so many institutions that can actually work on our gender reform. We have so many institutional enforcement agencies in Nigeria that sprung up, but they are underpaid. They are underpaid not because there is no money. They are underpaid because those money is mismanaged. I hope you understand me. If you
Yes.
go into the Ministry of Women Affairs and then you ask them, okay, how much was allocated for
Your network is a bit clumsy. I've muted you so that we can go back into the discussion fully. Maybe if you move away from where you are currently, I know you are on transit, we will be able to hear you clearly as we move on. So, Chike, I want us to test something.
Okay.
Let's test the predicability argument. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
At the moment any bill is drafted, as a public policy person that you are, what signs tell you that this policy or this bill is going to struggle later? What can we look out for before it's even signed, ratified, or whatever? What should we look out for?
Yeah. So because it is a very broad question, I'll start in a broad way. But then there are particular things you can ask me later on. So the first and important thing that every policy needs to have is what we call implementation mechanisms. Mechanisms that make sure that this thing drafted out can come into reality. So for example, in INEC's case, let's do a rewind to 2011. After 2011 elections, a full rewind 2007. Yes, that's a better example. After 2007 elections, which I called the Nigerian election dark days, so dark ages. That was our worst election ever. It was so bad, it was really, really bad. Till date, we don't know what some states counted. Till now, like we have no record of it. All we know that I won the election. But that aside, after that happened, that was the first time that there was a push for our elections to become more electronic. So in 2011, we now had smart card readers and all of that. So, but now, this is what I'm happy on. So when that happened, there was call for reforms of our electoral acts to allow for the use of electronic devices to remove the human elements and all of that. When the House agreed upon it, the next thing that happens is that because in this context of elections, we have a body called INEC. Like I said, these bodies are very important. There's a body called INEC. And we can say that, okay, if INEC is not saying that, okay, from now on, we need to have electronic devices, right? INEC now has to interpret that law. Okay, what does electronic devices mean currently based on current day technology? That's how this is going. INEC now says, okay, we have something we call smart card readers, because the issue was that there was multiple thumb printing. Back then we use thumb prints. Yeah. So now let's have smart card readers can read everybody's thumb prints. Smart card readers, okay, how much do they cost? Where can we get them from? And then does all this thinking and now brings the House of Reps and Senate a budget, which is not signed and okay. And then based on that budget, INEC is now to work on the 2011 elections. It was the first time we had smart card readers. This is the pipeline. This is the pipeline of how policy should go. There is the policy, there is the body implementing it, and then the mechanisms around that implementation. What is the problem is where there is just policy, bam. There is no implementing body. And then there's no fund around that implementing body. Either one of the two. So in some cases, it's a case where there's a body implementing it, but there's no body implementing it so dormant, so useless, don't do anything. So in that case, surefire, this policy will fail. It's not rocket science to fail.
Like it has already, you will know that it will fail before it even see the light of day.
Exactly. So very important is the policy, then the implementing body, then the implementing mechanisms. There are other things around evaluation and monitoring, but that's a more advanced question. Let's not go there today.
All right. Now, my last question before we go into the question in the comments section is, what is the most dangerous misunderstanding young reformers have about how change actually happens in their country? Take Nigeria as a case study because you live in Nigeria.
This is near and dear to my heart. Very near and dear to my heart. But a young person also, we're all young people. Yeah, so I'll say one of the most basic mistakes we make is that how do I put this? So there's what I call the 3 A's. There's activism, there's advocacy, there's action.
Okay.
A1 and A2 do not necessarily translate into A3. This is action. So, for example, let's say there's an issue. Let me pick Nigeria, for example. Most prominent issue where the last few years has been NSAS, right? And police brutality. It's happening across the country. Some people are being assaulted. Some people are being killed, in fact. People are complaining. It leads to activism. People are shouting, we no go agree. What do you want? NSAS. What do you want? NSAS. We're on the streets for about 2 weeks. And then it goes on and on and on and on and on. Eventually, they clamp down. Everything that happens. People die. Government denies their death. That's another from that day. But then, amidst all of this, if you remember correctly, while the activism was going on, there was now some kind of effort that was concerted towards drafting out a list of the things you want. Remember, right? There was a list of the things. So now, from the activism, that moved into advocacy. That's advocacy. Saying, okay, this is exactly what we want to achieve. This is that, and all of that. Now, if you just stop there and don't move into action, action now is where you now begin to employ CSOs, civil service organizations, and policy think tanks, and try to press the policymakers into making the right choices on these things. If you don't do that, if you don't get involved in that action, you are wasting your time. You have wasted all the energy you use for activism and for advocacy. It will be a waste of your time. My biggest problem with young people of today, myself included, is that we are too ignorant. And apart from the 3 A's, there are 3 things. I don't have enough time to read all of this. I don't have enough time. But let me just say one of the things. There's one key thing.
You know, we are still going to dissect the whole thing on the 8th. So there's a lot of learning.
I'll get there. So let me just say there's one thing that takes you from activism through advocacy to action. And that is knowledge. It's very important not only to have youthful energy to shout and to push for stuff, but to have the awareness. Okay, what's actually going here? How much is being spent? Who is accountable? Who has mismanaged this money? What can we do about it? Because that knowledge is what makes your noise palatable. Our point is no longer noise. It's now okay. All this noise is summarized into our 5-point agenda. If it's not like that's codified, not arranged, it's useless to the government. It can't do anything. And the only thing that can take all that activism, all that pushing for certain initiatives into the level of advocacy is knowledge and strategy. Once you've done that, now comes to level of action. My biggest problem with our youth of today is that we're stuck on level 1. We are stuck on activism. We are stuck there. We're very active. We have energy. We are young. We have time. We can shout. We can drag. We can do all these things. But we cannot take the time to learn about stuff and say, okay, how can we organize all this our energy into a means to directly engage with policymakers? Not going beyond. So I can give several examples, but we don't have time for it really. But that's the key thing. We need to learn how to move clearly from activism to advocacy to action.
I think I resonate with what you're saying, because I could remember when back then in higher institution in the university, you learn one thing, especially if you go to the kind of school I went to. I went to University of Ibadan in Nigeria, and they call it the 3 C's of Aluta. If you go to University of Ibadan or any of these universities that is strong when it comes to student activism, you will know what the 3 C's of Aluta is. The first one is consultation, consolidation before you confront, which is basically what you just said in another language entirely. But people tend to always jump to number 3 before they fully explore option 1 and 2. And when you jump to option 3 from the beginning, it's like you want to climb a tree and you want to climb from the top. It's impossible. It's literally impossible climb a tree from the top. You have to go down up to get to the top.
Yes.
So what you're saying is the misconception or the misunderstanding young reformers or young advocates, as it were, in Nigeria where you are, and I'm certain most of the people around the world will have the same mindset, is don't jump to activism as the number one thing to do. There's a lot of things to do first. Sometimes just use your head and let your head, sometimes something that's supposed to be just be saying sorry. Ordinary sorry will solve a problem that you now escalate to a very big problem. So thank you for that response. Let's go to the question from the audience. I have two questions from Peggy. The first question is, if politicians are not the best policy makers, then who should be making the policy for the general people?
Okay. So this question is very sensitive. So first of all, I'll give you my honest answer. Then I'll give you my democratic answer, just to talk about it and to explain. The honest answer is that a society cannot have better policy makers than its people. You can have, so for example now, when we're having talks about Nigerian government is so bad, they are so evil. People always forget that all these people, they have family members, they have brother, they have sister, they have grandfather, like you, they have cousin. They have cousin that's collecting money from them, they're stealing. My point is that there's no clear means to divide politicians from people. They are us, we are them, together. Maybe not individually, but as a sum. They are our representatives as a sum. The people that get there are our collective choice. But that's aside. Now, to the more democratic answer, let me put it this way. So, politicians are legitimate decision makers in democracy. The question is not who makes policy, it's how policy gets made, really, and what inputs go into making policy. So, those are different questions, first of all. In our research, what we found is that politicians make policy, and this is not only our research globally, politicians make policies under a specific set of pressures. These pressures are constant every single time. I want you to look at it this way. Every time you say policy that's come out, that's been made, keep these four things in mind. One, the electoral cycle. Very important. Whatever a politician is doing, he's doing it to guarantee that he'll be here next time. That's one. Two, he's doing it based on his patronage networks. This thing, what people are saying, how does it benefit me? And the people that are linked to me, the people that sponsor me, their interests are also in mind. So there's that. Three, cultural constituencies. Very important. And this is very important because despite all the electoral cycle has importance, patronage networks. If you put your constituency clamor enough, you must move. You can't say that because you must move eventually. So they keep that in mind also. And four, party interests. Very important. These are the four things that governs any policy. And now this is from the political aspect, because I'm not only a policy guy. I try to also be in the real world and say this is what's going on. So from the political aspect, when they make any policy, they keep these four things in mind. One, the electoral cycle. Two, they are linked to. Three, their constituency. And four, party interests. So for example, in the bill that we defined what it means to electronically transmit elections just 2 weeks ago, if you notice, all the people that voted aye for that bill, all of them are APC, LP, none of them APC, none of them. Not one person APC in that list. Clearly, it should tell you that the APC party is in favor of this interpretation of the bill. Clearly. So that's on one side. The next. So the problem is not that politicians are making policy. The problem is that the incentives structure around policy makers is also misaligned with the outcomes that the policy is supposed to bring out. Let me explain. A policymaker who passes a gender equality law, for example, gets credit for the passage, regardless of whether the law is enforced or not.
Yeah.
The political reward is in the announcement, not in the delivery. You have to keep this in mind that policymakers only make policy. They don't execute it. So so they are doing everything they are doing. Yes, they don't execute it. So they're doing everything they are doing to show that we are doing you well, though. If the people that execute it fail, it's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. They have no interest there at all. So now, the actual question should be, who should be involved? And the answer to that, to be honestly, is that good policy requires a division of labor that sometimes blurs democracy. So politicians should make political decisions. They always make it that way. Like, what values society wants to prioritize, what trade-offs are acceptable, what public mandate supports. That is their role, legitimately. But in actual sense, the technical design on how to achieve these values, how to structure an enforcement mechanism, what data systems need to exist to make this policy work well, how to align budgets with policy goals, all of that requires I'll say technical expertise and institutional knowledge that politicians on their own, because of short-term political pressure, they can't do all these things. In their mind, it's as simple as what will get you elected. So once they pass that bill,
let me stop you there, Chike. Because if I don't stop you there, you will continue. You will continue. Oyedamola, let me come to you. There's another question from Peggy. There's another question from Peggy, and I want you to answer it. If you can answer it within the space of 2 minutes, it will be fine. She says that I was going to ask as well whether activism can be possible without violence. We are seeing a rise of violent movement across Africa and the world in pursuit of change. Also, on the other hand, government don't often respond to consultation and peaceful protest. So the main question is, can we have activism without violence?
Yes, we can have activism without violence. Although now the problem comes with the fact that a lot of people don't understand what activism is. A lot of people think that, young people think that violence gets attacked by force. So they have to report violence, they have to review violence, they have to put violence. But you can do your activism without violence. And I'm going to give examples from when I was in university. I think it was in about 2013 or 2012 that they wanted to change the name of Uniland. And then president came out and said, we don't have.
I think we have a network issue with Oyedamola again. And our time is fast spent. Okay, I'm going to move to Oyedamola, and I think I can answer a bit of that. I believe that we can have activism without violence, but I will not call it activism. I will call it advocacy. Because by the time you start being an activist, there's always this, I don't know if it's just African mentality of activism. Once you hear activists when it comes to Nigeria mindset, you will start seeing them, Yoruba will call them Ajijagbara. Even our local name does not suit what we really need to, what that word actually bring out. So most times, I think I would just say advocacy. And there is nothing, I will say it and not say it again, there is nothing that consultation and peaceful protest cannot solve. It might take time, and force can take faster, but at the end of the day, peaceful always win, as it were. So what I will learn this evening, we only have a very, very few time left, and I really don't want to go out of it. Chike has given us some words. Seriousness of a law of policy is shown when government allocates money to it. Good policy utilize resources. Politics itself focus on who gets what and when. Also, we've only noticed that law alone do not alter incentives. Federal system can both protect and paralyze reform, depends on how it is used. And local domestication of law goes a long way. We've also noticed that reforms with enforcement is institutional symbolism. Then an unresolved question remains: how do we design reform that are politically survivable and institutionally durable? That is the question that we need to have on the back of our mind right now, because that question is larger, much more larger than gender policy. And it's about how Nigeria, Zambia, Botswana, whatever country you are, reform itself. We want to really thank our partners at Simple Fix Nigeria. Thanks to Chike and to Indamola, who represent the organization. And thanks to our participants for engaging seriously in this discussion. On the 8th of next month, 8th of next month, sound like forever in my eye. On the 8th of next month, we are going to be launching this document that you're seeing on your screen. Is Bridging the Gender Gap, a policy brief on SDG 5 implementation in Nigeria. This is given to us by Simple Fix Nigeria for policy literacy and public benefit. So until next time that we are going to see ourselves on this channel, that is the last Saturday of next month, for another episode of the Liberty Briefings. This is from the World Headquarters of Face of Liberty International. Good night.